There are just a handful of moments in my life where I look back on and wonder, what on earth was I thinking? Was I under the effects of some kind of wizard spell? Because there is just no way that I could ever be like that today. But the thing is, I knew exactly what I was thinking, because I can pinpoint the moment I adopted certain ideas, or was influenced by arguments that changed my philosophy on a topic. Today, I am going to tell the story of how that happened with me going vegan in July of 2021, and how I spent the next year of my life struggling with health issues, both physical and mental, directly as a result of veganism, and why I discourage others from trying this lifestyle because trust me, it does not end well. So I am going to start this story by telling you a little bit of me as a person. I consider myself a very curious guy. From a very young age, I love to learn about everything and anything. This would make me dive deep into a variety of topics. Usually how it goes is that I encounter a rabbit hole of information on a subject that I have never explored. Whether it is a new technology like AI, politics, a new music genre, an online community, the history of a region of the world, etc. I would then spend weeks or even months researching said topic, reading different books, watching documentaries, YouTube videos, listening to an artist's whole discography. You get the idea. This is the reason why I just love making videos on YouTube. I like learning about new information and sharing it with other people. And as you grow up in your teens and 20s, you learn that there is so much that your school, your parents, your community just don't tell you about.
How many other lies have I been told by the council?
And this would also lead to a lot of moments where I felt rebellious, adopting ideas just to spite my parents or other adults, because I was like going through these rebellious phases and I just wanted to get into topics that the adults just wouldn't get. I love debating subjects such as religion and politics with other people, much to their annoyance because I used to get very pushy about it. And this sort of juvenile mentality is what led me to veganism in the first place, often arriving at extreme conclusions in a very short time. My first exploration of the topic came after diving deep into environmentalism. Concern about climate change grew exponentially right around Greta Thunberg's famous speech at the UN Climate Action Summit.
How dare you!
And I researched the hell out of it. I binge-watched countless videos on climate change from channels such as Kurzgesagt, I read books, tried to inform myself as much as possible about the issue, and I even started making videos about the topic. I became so worried about climate change that I even wanted to become a YouTuber focused completely on it. This is what led me directly into the rabbit hole of veganism. After a couple of months of research on climate change in early 2021, I came across increasing discussions about the role of meat in climate change and how it affects the environment. The mainstream idea among climate activists became that eating meat, especially beef, is one of the worst things that you can do on an individual level. And a bit after that, I began watching the Netflix documentaries, otherwise known as the vegan sacred texts. Watching documentaries such as Cowspiracy, What the Health, Seaspiracy, Dominion became my gateway into the world of veganism, and from there it all went downhill. Now, I want to define two different types of veganism because it is important to the story, and also focuses on the different philosophies, mentalities, and views surrounding the ideology and diet of veganism. Those two types identified by myself are dogmatic and pragmatic veganism. Pragmatic veganism is what I consider the more rational and permissive type of veganism. They are against eating meat themselves, but they recognize that it isn't as simple for the vast majority of people. They accept that eating meat is a morally gray issue every single time, and that there are alternatives such as ethical farming or hunting that are much better in the ethical sense than factory farming. And they realize that this is the case for a lot of people, and they think it's a better option if they hunt or do something else to obtain their meat. Pragmatic vegans operate under the principle that it is actually defined by the vegan society. Veganism is a philosophy and a way of living which seeks to exclude, as far as is possible and practicable, all forms of exploitation and cruelty to animals for food, clothing, or any other purpose, with emphasis on the word practicable. The extent of the practicability of veganism is often debated, but in my opinion, pragmatic vegans are far more nuanced and mentally balanced than their counterpart that we're going to discuss later on. They are often the type of person who's not going to have a complete mental breakdown if they discover that their food was accidentally prepared with butter. The popular philosophy YouTuber Alex O'Connor adopts this worldview, or at least he did before he started eating meat again, where afterwards he received countless insults and even death threats from lunatic vegans.
In other words, like if you think that veganism means that you don't harm animals in the production of your food, then what are you eating exactly? You're probably going to be starving yourself. And so even for the vegan who eats nothing but plants, we're still contributing to some animal suffering. We just recognize that by eating the plants directly, we're contributing to a lot less. So we already grant the idea that to be vegan is just to minimize animal suffering to the highest extent that we can, which means that if there were a situation in which the way to minimize the amount of animal suffering was to go and, shoot the elk, then go and shoot the elk and call yourself a vegan for all I care. I'm just interested in the ethics of minimizing suffering here.
I mention him because he is one of the 3 video creators that influenced my worldview the most throughout this period. The other 2 being Earthling Ed and Mike the Vegan, 2 of who belong in the next category. Dogmatic vegans, on the other hand, argue that there is not a single instance where eating meat is morally permissible. They argue that animals have intrinsic rights, such as human beings, on the basis of their sentience or ability to feel pleasure and pain. They don't even consider things like meat, eggs, or even milk as food, and they argue that eating things like fish is equivalent to eating human flesh.
I mean, I think to be consistent, if you believe that it's right to eat the animal product, then you would have to be consistent to say, I think it's right to eat the baby, because if the arguments are the damage is already done, I can't, this is the situation we're in.
Well, I'd at least say it's not wrong, even if it's not right. I'd say not immoral.
It's not wrong. Okay, not immoral. But I do think it is, because at the same time, I think I wouldn't want someone to do that with my flesh, even though I hold no real kind of, I guess.
Really?
No, I wouldn't. If I died and then like someone ended up eating my flesh, I would probably now I'd rather they didn't do that. So.
And oftentimes they go as far as to equate the life of a fish as morally equivalent as that of a human being.
I have a longer relationship with that animal. Why would I kill the animal before I'd save that person? Because it's about relationship.
You kill a person over an animal. That's
correct. Because I believe human beings are animals.
Now I see humans at a different level, but maybe you value fish at the same level as a person. We see it very different.
I do.
This point of view seems extreme to normal people, but I have to give dogmatic vegans credit where it's due, because aside from this point of view being completely asinine and ludicrous, it is actually more consistent than that of pragmatic vegans. Hear me out. After all, if you truly believe that it is our moral imperative to reduce suffering as much as possible, wouldn't you go as far as to argue that we should just get rid of the entire natural ecosystem and not eat any animals at all? Because even in nature, predators eat prey, and that causes suffering to the prey. And after all, we're rational human beings who have control over the natural ecosystem, as we've done for the last 100 years. Why don't we just get rid of everything? Like, just replace everything with strip malls and concrete structures until everything is just a gigantic planet filled with concrete and there's no nature, because these predators are morally problematic.
Cattle are slaughtered every year. I'd say there are way more wild animal deaths across all species than that alone. Just if you eat cow, it's the same argument, right?
And I advocate for displacing the wild world into non-existence, right? Like I think the natural world is actually morally problematic, and I advocate for its non-existence.
So I'm sorry. Can you expand upon that? What does that mean? You advocate for getting rid of the natural world, and we live in a...
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, the natural world is filled with death and destruction, things I find morally problematic.
So
why wouldn't I?
What would you replace that with?
Human infrastructure.
Human infrastructure, and you're saying we would do a better job as humans.
Yeah, I would even go so far as I think the end goal should be to ditch this ball, because it's a liability in and of itself.
It is also worth noticing that these 2 categories of veganism are just independent of how crazy the individual vegan is. We'll consider that a whole different axis on the vegan scale, although dogmatic vegans tend to be more extreme for obvious reasons. But for example, a pragmatic vegan might adopt the view that not everybody can become veganism, that there's nuance, but at the same time it's the type of person who just goes into shopping centers and dresses up as a cow and just screams at people in the dairy aisle.
The dairy industry is worse than the meat industry.
On the other hand, you can have dogmatic vegans who maintain the position that it is just completely morally unjustifiable to eat any animals at all, but at the same time they live normal lives, they interact with people, they don't mind if others are sitting across the table eating a steak, they just realize that, okay, it's their choice, whatever, but I think it's not morally permissible. The reason why I took the time to define these 2 terms is because I'm going to use them over the course of the video, but also because I want to illustrate how my philosophy changed from bad to worse. Because I went from pragmatic to dogmatic veganism for a while, and that had some serious consequences in my way of thinking. I did not become a vegan overnight. Over the course of months, I was researching opinions and points of view from all different sides, trying to form my view of how best to approach this topic. I watched a variety of YouTube channels, such as the one I mentioned before, binging their videos routinely every single day. I convinced myself that they knew better, and often listened to their arguments in the presumption that they were right. I got really invested into this issue because I thought it was one of the most important issues in our modern age. Alex O'Connor, although being far more intense before, became a huge influence on my way of thinking, since his point of view seemed very nuanced. And through his videos, you came to understand that he cared about the truth. Mike the Vegan gave the facade that he was a well-researched doctor on nutrition, giving valuable information with each video. But the truth is that all he does is cherry pick and push misinformation and pseudoscience that only favor the vegan agenda. And he continues a common theme in veganism where they hide under the guise of being the scientific and rational types, where they push misinformation, they make it sound like it's reputable, like it comes from like really well-researched sources. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of cherry-picked information, misinformation, and vegan sources that provide the research articles they often cite. Earthling specializes on the more potent, ethically and emotionally appealing arguments for veganism, using the Dominion method, where he tries to convince the audience that all meat is sourced in the most unethical ways possible.
Dairy cows ultimately are bred into existence to live a life of misery and suffering, and also that we can needlessly exploit them to steal their breast milk.
If you compare a vegan and a non-vegan, the non-vegan's far more forceful because a non-vegan makes animals, tens of billions of animals every single year, suffer terribly for the food choices they make.
I used to take his entire word as gospel, but now I realize how unsettling this character is. He projects to me the cult-like aspects of veganism in a single person, from the tone of his voice, his mannerisms, the dead look in his eyes, to the content of what he says. He seems like the sort of person who has completely bought into an ideology, sacrificing other areas in his life, and is willing to lie in order to support his worldview. This is not somebody who strikes me as trustworthy, but the way he speaks and is able to convince so many people, myself in the past included, reminds me of people like Charles Manson or Jim Jones.
Sometimes people can then find it hard to maintain that conviction to veganism, because the truth is, when we become so passionately vegan, which it is so important for us to become, but when that passion for veganism can sometimes then make it difficult for us to integrate with the world around us, exist with the world around us, we then find ourselves stuck between a rock and a hard place, because the world isn't changing fast enough for us to necessarily feel relieved of those feelings that we have. And so as a consequence, for some people, perhaps they lose that drive for veganism because that's an easy way out of that uncomfortableness.
It also seems like he's losing his mind. I catch his newest videos every once in a while, and it looks like the B12 deficiency has finally caught up to him with the way that he expresses himself. From the content of his videos, to the increasing bouts of anger and frustration that more people are starting to wake up at the scam that veganism is. Along with the declining stock of Beyond Meat, seeing the vegan high priest lose it like this makes my day sometimes. As the first weeks and months passed by, I didn't feel any different. Vegans love to claim that you get superpowers and add 3 inches to your penis, or whatever they claim in the Game Changers documentary, but I ended up believing a lot of nonsense, such as that eating 1 egg is equivalent to smoking 5 cigarettes.
I never really thought about eggs much. I just thought of them as a standard part of a healthy diet. But then I found a study suggesting that eating just 1 egg a day can be as bad as smoking 5 cigarettes per day for life expectancy.
Or that ultra-processed meat is healthier than real meat. I can go down the list, but you get the idea. When vegans hide themselves under the facade that they're the scientific and rational ones, they can just bombard you with information such as articles and scientific studies and just overwhelm you with information until you just give up and come to the conclusion that, okay, these people know better, so I'm just not gonna go into do the research because they have already done it. The Netflix documentaries are a big source of this type of pseudo-information, but I also ended up believing a lot of sources that are commonly cited, such as the famous Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics position on vegan and vegetarian diets, which is taken as a gospel, and is essentially the first source thrown at you when you question the vegan narrative. This is despite the Academy being heavily influenced by food giants and ultra-processed food companies. Now, I want to talk about ultra-processed food. The biggest issue with veganism, aside from the social and mental aspects, is the type of food that you eat. Influenced by the repulsive feelings I had towards meat, my refusal to eat any types of animal products meant that I had to cook my own food, because it was the only way that I was making sure that I had 100% vegan meals, instead of just going outside and spending more money that is necessary on takeout and vegan restaurants and all that kind of stuff. So I really went in by this point of my journey. So I ate up a lot of home-cooked meals in the beginning, lots of lentils and tofu, but of course life catches up to you, and there's not much time to go buy groceries, cook, and measure the macro and micronutrients at each one of my meals in order to make sure that I wasn't deficient in anything. So of course, when I went out, I had to buy stuff to fill the holes in my diet. I ended up eating a lot of ultra-processed meals and snacks such as Oreos, ice cream, chips, stuff like that I just ate in the go because it was the only vegan alternative. Vegan burgers, I went to, like, for example, the Burger King Whoppers. I ate a lot of those. I used to go to Subway. I just had just vegetables on the bread and that's it. So I was constantly snacking on ultra-processed foods because I was constantly hungry, and that is despite eating thousands of calories a day. And I also bought a lot of imitation products. God, I ate so many of those. I'm talking about vegan burgers, vegan meats, Beyond Meat, vegan ice cream, cheese, like all those kind of ultra processed products. I bought a bunch of those. I even had a list of all the things that I used to buy and just compared them, like different brands, to see which ones were closest to the real thing. I drank a lot of soy milk, like oat milk. I tried all the different types of vegan milk. And there's a really ugly truth behind these. It is important to mention that all these products, despite being marketed as healthier and more sustainable, are all loaded with artificial ingredients such as food dyes, sugar, seed oils, sweeteners, preservatives. That is without even mentioning the taste. Vegan cheese, more like let's pretend this block of sadness is edible and delicious. Like I was just basically deluding myself like it was good for me that I was eating all this stuff, because at the end of the day, it was vegan. But I had no idea what I was getting into. I didn't even know how these products were made. I just bought into the ideology and bought all these products because it was the right thing to do. But let's take some time to analyze what exactly I was eating, because vegans love to talk about how meat eaters do it for the taste, or they talk about all the time about taste buds, like, oh, we put our taste and our like a good meal over the life of an animal. It's all about the taste.
And if we consider that one of the main reasons we eat animal products is because they taste nice, that means that one of our primary motivators is enjoyment.
But this could be further from the truth. The largest claim in favor for a vegan diet is that eating meat is not necessary for a healthy life, but this is just simply a lie. Let's focus first on the macronutrients, because it is often argued that you can get enough protein on a vegan diet. According to MyFitnessPal, 100 grams of chicken breast contain 165 calories and 31 grams of protein. If you eat 5 eggs, you get 358 calories and 31 grams of protein. To obtain around the same amount of protein on a vegan diet, your best bet is to eat tofu, since it contains the lowest calorie to protein ratio. You'll have to eat 300 grams of tofu, which contain 249 calories and 30 grams of protein. But keep in mind that you have to eat 3 times the volume of food. If you get sick of eating so much tofu and decide to eat lentils, you would have to eat 350 grams, which contain 399 calories and 31 grams of protein. That is over a 3 times increase of the volume of food that you're eating. And that is not even counting the amount of carbs that you get from plant-based sources, compared from lean, animal source protein. You're getting a whopping 68 grams of carbohydrates. And this is why I consider these sources such as lentils as carbohydrate sources with more protein than usual, not protein sources themselves. You have to be constantly eating these large meals to get the same amount of protein that you would get from animal-based products on a vegan diet. And tofu, so much damn tofu. The macronutrient argument is enough to prove the superiority of animal-based products, but let's take a look at the micronutrients. Plant-based diets lack a huge number of nutrients, such as vitamin B12, omega-3s, iron, including heme iron, zinc, essential amino acids, and many more. Even vegans argue that you have to be constantly monitoring your health to be healthy on a vegan diet. You have to be constantly taking blood tests, monitoring your micronutrients, making sure that everything is okay, like everything, taking a lot of supplements, taking your B12 supplements.
So a few months down the line where you're like, I don't really need to keep taking this, you pick that B12 right back up and you take it.
So they argue that veganism is supposedly the healthiest diet, all while taking a variety of ultra-processed pills and powders in order to make sure that everything is in order, but they still claim that it is healthier than eating meat? Does this even make a shred of sense? To me, this represents the epitome of the anti-human and self-destructive mentality that permeates all of veganism. And I found the arguments surrounding this amusing, because some even go as far as to argue that, yeah, it's not natural, but it's all worth it because at the end of the day, you're doing it for a greater cause. Like the cause is more important than petty things like our personal health. They also love to point out how us evil meat eaters just use the naturalist fallacy, or arguing that something is good or bad on the basis that if it's natural or not natural. But this is simply not true. Being vegan is bad for all the reasons I have already mentioned and will continue mentioning, but it just so happens to also be unnatural. I'm just pointing that fact out. And to be fair, things that are unnatural for our bodies also tend to be bad. For example, the way that we excessively medicate ourselves and supplement our bodies and nutrients to compensate for the toll that modern society has on our bodies, instead of just getting to the root causes and fixing them. At the end of the day, there is nothing more anti-human than feeding ourselves these diets for the sake of some vague external cause, when we can just be focusing on our health the same way that we have done for thousands and thousands of years. And this is bad, especially if you don't understand how nutrition works, which is what I did when I was vegan. I didn't know how protein works, how protein synthesis works. I didn't know how micronutrients work. I just was focused 100% on not eating meat. And finally, this is also why I consider feeding your children or pets a vegan diet abusive and something that should be very shamed in our society, but that is a subject for a whole other conversation. Before I continue with my story, it is important to explain something that I have not heard many people discuss of vegan diets. It is not just about the physical toll. It's not about the nutrient deficiencies or having to explain yourself to others, going lots of days just hungry, or just binging on ultra-processed food. It's more about the mental toll that it has on your mind. There is a constant feeling that you're not doing enough, that you're not taking your veganism too far. If you're in a rush and decide to eat a meal that contains cheese in it, you get a profound sense of self-consciousness and dread. To make a long story short, when you're a vegan, being a vegan has to be on your mind 24/7. It consumes every aspect of your life, to the point where you have to make countless precautions and preparations in order to become the perfect and enlightened vegan. Otherwise, in your own mind, you are an immoral monster. This also extends to the way you see other people. It is not enough to simply believe in what you believe. You have to let other people know about what you learn to convert them to veganism. After all, you see the entire animal agriculture sector as an evil that must be defeated. And perhaps the most bizarre belief is how vegans see the future. Like many religions that talk about a day of reckoning, many vegans, especially dogmatic ones, talk about a future where animal agriculture literally disappears. Where every single person on earth just accepts the idea of veganism and we don't eat any more meat because we become these enlightened, morally perfect beings that just completely subscribe to this idea.
So if we eat less meat, we could significantly reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. Now, some people would be willing to eat less meat, but they lack the willpower. Human engineering could help. Just as some people are naturally intolerant to milk or crayfish, like myself, we could artificially induce mild intolerance to meat by stimulating our immune system against common bovine proteins. And in this way, we can create an aversion to eating eco-unfriendly food. And we can do this, for example, by having meat patches, kind of like nicotine patches. People can then wear these patches before they go out for dinner to curb their enthusiasm for eating meat.
That's good. All right, if you could make one law in the world that everyone had to follow, what would it be?
Oh, wow. I mean, the dogmatic side of me says be vegan, obviously. Yeah. And obviously, I mean, if there was one law in the world, yeah, that's what I'd want. But I appreciate, that sounds so dogmatic, doesn't it? But I'd have to say that, don't I? So yeah.
I was expecting it.
Yeah.
For this reason, you see yourself as one of the pioneers, like one of the people who saw the future and were on the right side of history. You get a very powerful sense of moral righteousness. You just have to wait until the rest of the world catches up to your ideology. And this is also why, bizarrely, many vegans, in a morally confused way, compare their movement to universal suffrage or the civil rights movement, and even compare things like dairy farming to the Holocaust, which I just find it completely ludicrous. You also feel a profound sense of loneliness, like nobody gets you, like nobody understands what you're thinking, what you're going through. You find it hard to express your ideas to other people. So this is why you turn to online communities and forums. I found people who understood me in YouTube comment sections and Reddit threads. I wanted to belong to this community because they were the ones who understood, and this ended up isolating myself more from real life people. Sounds like a cult already? There are many ways that this presents itself. Going back to friends and family, I can't count how many times I just went to visit friends and just not eating anything at all at a meal, like at a restaurant, or just eating a side like French fries. And I just came off as weird, as strange. They didn't understand me, so I felt that profound sense of loneliness just expand after that. You know what's really tough is staring at your friend's hamburger from across the table while you have your bland plate of French fries like you're in a hostage situation. So in my righteous mind, I knew that I was right, that I was doing the correct course of action, but I just felt this pit in my stomach. You know, aside from all the ultra-processed food, that's a completely different pit in my stomach. But I felt also this necessity for the day of reckoning of veganism to come soon enough. And this is also why vegans react so badly when people ditch the diet and become ex-vegans, because it scares them to know that this might happen to them. And all that they believed and held so dear means nothing in the end. I know this because I felt this way each time a new celebrity or YouTuber announced that they were no longer vegan. As with many cults, whenever they leave, they also retort to the argument that they were never true believers. They're just people who, quote, dabbled in a plant-based diet for a few months.
We've all heard the phrase ex-vegan, and usually it's a phrase that's attributed to some online influencer, someone who was dabbling with a plant-based diet for a little while, and then makes this video announcing to the world that they're no longer vegan.
This also reminds me of how communists argue that their failure of their ideologies is because it was not true communism and that it has never been tried before. Those fake vegans were just not trying hard enough, they were not taking the right supplements, not doing enough blood tests, and it just never ends, it's never enough, and that adds to people just giving up. It is a constant uphill battle to see who is the most virtuous vegan and who is the most dedicated seller to the ideology. The final idea that I want to tie to this point is how veganism changed my relationship to food. There was a point in this process in late 2021 where I developed a deep aversion to eating animal products of any kind, to the extent where I would consider it a full eating disorder. After all the arguments, documentaries, and ideas that I was exposed to, I really came to believe that eating meat was just pure evil. And of course, looking back on this, I can see why other people were worried about me. Friends and family reached out, they're worried about my mental and physical health because I was taking it way too extreme. And I just, in my mind, I thought it was right. Like, I thought it was just the righteous thing to do. And I was aware of my mental health declining, of my physical health declining. But in my mind, it was all part of the process because at the end of the day, I was like some kind of strong martyr for the animal rights cause. So far in this video, I can already picture the comment section with vegans just raging about everything I've said so far. Oh, poor guy, suffering for not eating meat while the animals and farms actually suffer. Get a grip. You just didn't do veganism right, like us enlightened veteran vegans. Oh, you poor soul. I have been vegan for 25 years and I am fine. You want me to feel sorry for you? First of all, as I'll focus on more later, I could not care less about the opinions of hardcore vegans about me for as long as I live. After seeing firsthand how their mentality works and how anti-human it is, I could not have less respect on their opinion. In fact, in my mind, this video marks the closing chapter on me even ever touching the subject again. But just to address this argument once, yes, I do consider my mental and physical health more important than the lives of the animals that I eat. This doesn't mean that I support the cruel practices that happen within factory farming or the destruction of the environment. I encourage people to shop sustainable and local whenever possible, and reject industrialized and ultra-processed products to prevent this. But the way I see it, the main focus we need to have in this subject is to put human health first and foremost in the conversations. After that, we can move into more ethical and sustainable options for obtaining meat, but if you really want to get into philosophical, abstract discussions about the morality of eating meat instead of just the lives of real-life human beings who experience this, I think that you're the one in the wrong. So if you, the hardcore vegan, see the stories of all these people who've tried and failed these diets, and you still don't understand why people have an aversion to veganism, well, I'm sorry, but you're the one who's not getting the full picture. The biggest point to consider in the whole vegan ordeal is that no matter how hard you try, you will never be 100% vegan. Hell, you can extend it to the fact that you're never going to be 100% ethical in this world. The self-flagellation that I experienced had little to no impact towards the end, and the final straw before I started making this video was about a news article that I read, going back to the topic of environmentalism. Why the sky is still full of empty ghost flights, from CNN. A new report by The Guardian, based on a Freedom of Information request, found that at the end of last year, there were around 500 ghost flights departing from the UK every month. And in January 2022, analysis from Greenpeace claimed that more than 100,000 ghost flights would sail over European skies this winter. The climate damage, claims the environmental group, is equivalent to the yearly emissions of more than 1.4 million cars. So after all the grief and self-destruction that I put myself through, what did I accomplish? What changes did I actually make in a world where ghost flights and Taylor Swift's jet engine and generate more emissions than I could ever make in several lifetimes if I only ever ate meat? Can you really look me in the eye and tell me that I'm wrong for just not giving a shit anymore? There is also the issue of crop deaths. This is one of the most common retorts to veganism, since a lot of animals get killed each time soy, corn, or wheat is farmed. Doesn't this make this basically impossible to be vegan and it is all for show? The first response about hearing this argument is, well, a lot more crops are used to feed the animals in factory farming, so checkmate. While this argument stands true for factory farming, it does not for grass-fed beef, traditionally raised animal agriculture, and hunting, which could be considered even more vegan than crops that are grown for food, because you only have to kill one animal. Think about it, if you kill a grass-fed cow or hunt a deer, that will provide food for a family for months, and it will provide a much more complete and nutritious meal than lentils and tofu ever will. These are ideas that I wish I considered before I took the full plunge into complete veganism, but I was just inexperienced and naive back then, and now I know better. but I could have prevented a lot of also bad things that happened later on in my journey. As a final point in this line of thinking, if you truly want to make a sustainable and actionable change, and if you really want to boycott something and feel like you're making a big change, why not just boycott the soda and ultra-processed food companies? Soda is one of the most polluting industries on earth. The amount of water that is necessary to create a bottle of Coca-Cola is insane. And you can add to this fact that you're also improving your health on the way. For example, I'm almost close to 8 years without drinking any type of soda and close to 1 year without almost any ultra-processed food. I feel great. I actually feel like I'm making some change and my health hasn't suffered. And this is just completely different than eating meat, which is something that actually is nutritious for your body. Now that we have discussed my mental and emotional health issues, we're going to wrap it up by going back to my physical health. As the ancient adage says, the punch of reality rarely wears boxing gloves. And by this point in 2022, I was subsisting on a variety of plant-based foods, but it was mostly ultra-processed food. This included a large amount of fake meat alternatives, carbohydrates, and very poor management of nutrients. The result of this whole period is that I ended up gaining over 40 pounds of pure fat, while losing a large amount of muscle, developing chronic pain, and also having a variety of secondary health issues. The biggest issue for me had to be the chronic tendon pain. In 2022, I had a variety of injuries that also prevented me from working out and going to the gym. The first one started in January when I twisted my ankle, and that prevented me from running. I basically spent an entire year without doing cardio, without basically taking care of myself, my cardiovascular health, and that compounded the rest of those issues. I also had chronic pain after a couple minor accidents on my wrist, my right shoulder, my left arm, my lower back, and it became so unbearable. Actually, the one on my lower back caused one of the worst physical pains I've ever experienced in my life. Probably the worst pain I've ever experienced. It was just one morning, I had to go to the doctor, I basically couldn't move, and that type of chronic pain took a long time to fix. I tried going to the gym to fix my issues and also going to a physiotherapist, but due to the extreme amount of pain I felt in my tendons, I could not fix my injuries immediately, so I spent a long time just being sedentary, eating a lot of junk food, and it was just basically a compounding effect on each day that passed, and I just started to feel very miserable. My mental health also took a really strong hit because of this. I've always been very active. I love to exercise, and just not being able to do it just made me feel like I was broken in my own body. The pain was so intense some days that I would just want to lay in bed, and I felt all the other issues you often hear from vegans. They experience brain fog, gastrointestinal issues, a bunch of just like really bad effects on your body. And I believe that this is a combination of the ultra-processed food, the mentality. Also, I felt a lot of, like I said before, the isolation, the adherence to this mentality, the doubts I used to have. I felt very depressed, and this all is independent of the physical toll that it took in my body. Like the whole mental issues that arose from veganism are tough, and that's something that not many people talk when going through this journey. I felt shitty every day, and I just also felt a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression. I felt impulsive, like I started getting more mood swings. I became just like really made rash decisions, and like the whole brain fog, I just felt like it really interfered with my performance every day as a human being. There came a point where I just didn't care also about supplementation. I just basically succumbed. Like I didn't really care about how much B12 I was taking, how much vitamins. I just spend my life in automatic mode, just eating whatever vegan ultra-processed junk was in front of me, and I just didn't care. And I'm scared of what could have happened if I went down further this path. I also saw myself in the mirror. I didn't feel confident. I felt fat and ugly, and it just added to a lot of self-esteem issues that I had. And thinking about it now, I just realized like how bad that was and how long it took me to get out of that dark place. And I don't know, it feels weird to talk about it now because I feel better, but it's still, at the time, it didn't seem that way. I really can't stress enough how miserable I felt, and I still had this idea in my head that being vegan was the rational thing, and there were a lot of things going on in my life that didn't really make me focus on this. It was just like automatic programming just not to eat meat. When there were still a couple of doubts, and those doubts really made me feel bad. And I know like a lot of people experience this, especially after years. Like some people have 8 to 10 years experiencing this, and it's just really bad. And it took me a while also to get out of there. And that is what I'm going to explain next. Getting out of veganism and fixing not only my body, but my mind was not a walk in the park. I want to add that the sunk cost fallacy took a large part in this. I was afraid that people were going to say, I told you so. And there was a bit of that, but I'm honestly thankful for all the support that I received when I stopped being vegan. I'm not a doctor, an expert on nutrition, or an environmentalist, but guess what? Neither are the vegans who claim to know all the answers. The best I can do is explain what worked the best for me, and the truth is that a diet rich in animal protein has worked wonders for my body. I feel strong every single day, very energized, and the best of all is that I feel confident in my body. Like I actually feel confident in myself, I feel like energized, strong, and just prepared to take everything, the world, every single day. And I feel like the diet is a big part of that. So at the end of the day, this story has a happy ending because I consider it actually beneficial to my life, because due to this whole experience, I started being more conscious about my body and my health. So I started hitting the gym, started eating well, like actually focusing on what I eat, on the dangers of things like smoking, like alcohol, how it affects my body. And I just feel much more connected with the ecosystem that is my body and the system that just makes all the, my brain function and my body, my heart, all your organs, your muscles, everything is a really strong connection, and your diet is a big part of that. So I just love this. And like I said in the beginning, I love to go deep into these topics, and that's what happened with health in the last couple of years. I essentially saved myself from looking like Smeagol after being corrupted by the ring. And at the same time, I lost 40 pounds of fat. I lost them all again. I gained 10 pounds of muscle, and I feel much better. I started hitting the gym, going every day. I obtained a discipline and connection to my body that I never had before. My tendon and muscle pains completely disappeared, even though the whole process took months of constantly working out and eating well, even after quitting veganism. So, as you can tell from this video, I'm not a big fan of veganism. It was a completely miserable experience that I would not recommend, and at the end of the day, it humbled me. And it made me realize that I can also make mistakes, which led to a period of self-reflection. And I'm gonna be honest, I was hesitant if I should even do this video in the first place. I thought to myself, should I just leave this topic alone, let people live their lives if they choose to be vegan? It just doesn't affect me, but even though I had a bad experience. But I realized upon a lot of reflection that the answer is no. After a lot of pondering, I came to the conclusion that I simply cannot respect an ideology that directly harms people. Like I explained before, not only physically, but also mentally and emotionally. Why try the experiment that countless others have tried and failed? The truth is that we need meat to live long and healthy lives, and whoever tells you otherwise is lying to your face. I know that with this video I probably pissed off a large amount of hardcore vegans, but I honestly couldn't care less. As far as I'm concerned, I am completely done with this topic for the rest of my life. I don't even plan to entertain the idea of veganism for even a second again. But the good news is that I don't have to. Each month, more celebrities are starting to quit veganism, more people are starting to wake up to the scam that it is, and most importantly, people are also waking up to the dangers of ultra-processed food, which is a bonus. And these companies such as Beyond Meat and Impossible Burger are going bankrupt, so I think that's a bonus. People are starting to realize, like, if you really want to eat ultra-processed lab-grown meat or fake meat. Finally, as you can notice from this video, I am not scared or ashamed to clearly state my positions. In preparation for this video, I saw a couple ex-vegan videos from people who've been on the diet for a long time, and you can feel like an aura of just like ashamedness and sadness and just like being regretful for the decision to speak out against veganism. Those videos also have a feeling of failure throughout them, and that they're still trying to appease the cold as they leave through the door. So like some kind of Stockholm syndrome situation. They're all like, oh, I'm so sorry I disappointed you with this, and I know you guys expected better from me, but I'm not vegan anymore. Like, and that just seems so wrong. That's not what I'm trying to do here. I feel like if you're gonna take a stand, you have to take a stand, and you just kind of have to do that. And I understand because it's hard, especially if I was vegan for almost 2 years, but some people have been there for their entire lives. They're like, maybe their spouses are vegan too, their children, their community, and it can be hard. So I understand that. I have sympathy for ex-vegans who feel that way. And that is why I'm here to say that you're not a bad person if you eat meat. Let me repeat that again. You are not a bad person if you eat meat. You have nobody to apologize to. You don't have to live your life in shame, and everything is gonna be okay. That is why if my story helps even one person to move away from this harmful ideology, it was all worth it in the end. If you like this video, please like, share, and subscribe. I don't usually do political subjects or things that are too controversial, but I felt a strong need to do this video due to how directly it affected my life. But I also tend to give my life perspectives on other topics such as social media, technology, AI, and a lot of things that I really love. So if you like that, stick around in my channels, and I'll see you guys next time. Have an amazing day.